Welcome to Life is Brutal. I'm Anthony. Yesterday I posted a compilation of all the different beer commercials that aired during the 2023 Super Bowl. And while I was putting this all together, I couldn't help but see some very interesting, possibly alarming little indicators for what is to come in the beer world. So I'd like to share some of those insights with you today. Starting off with Budweiser. You have to talk about Budweiser if you're talking about Super Bowl advertising. And that's because for over 30 years, Budweiser, AB InBev, they've had a nearly exclusive contract signed with the NFL, making them the primary beer sponsor for the NFL. That's why if you're watching any of these like primetime slots, advertising slots, it's usually some type of Budweiser or Budweiser affiliate, the Michelob's, the Bushes, Natty Light, whatever. Something under the AB InBev umbrella is usually what you're seeing. This year, 2023, was actually the first year in 35 years that Budweiser did not re-up that exclusivity contract.
For the first time in 30 years, Coors Light has an ad in the big game.
Actually, this is a Miller Lite commercial.
And that's why the very first commercial that most people saw was the Coors Miller Lite Blue Moon commercial. So starting off, I think it was just incredibly interesting to be able to see some other fresh faces kind of in this advertising space that normally wouldn't be able to get their foot in that door. Now, that's not to say that these brands haven't participated in the grander Super Bowl advertising discussion in the past. I mean, Budweiser themselves have drugged them in with the whole rice syrup fiasco a couple years back.
Brewers of Miller Lite, we received your corn syrup by mistake.
That's not our corn syrup. We received our shipment this morning.
You're joking.
Try the Coors Light Castle. They also use corn syrup.
This is the first time in a long time that they were actually able to get a straightforward primetime advertisement. But that's not to say that Budweiser still did not absolutely dominate the advertising space in regards to beer. Overall, they were the primary sponsor for beer still. Over 3.5 minutes worth of advertising relating to Budweiser or Budweiser affiliated brands like Busch or Michelob. But that's definitely a warning sign, an alarm bell for what is happening in the greater world, especially in regards to the king of beers. The primary brand, Budweiser, Bud Heavy, it didn't even have a primetime advertising slot. In fact, most of the marketing went to those auxiliary brands or to Bud Light itself. Now, Budweiser did have a commercial, but it wasn't a primetime commercial. It was a regional exclusive commercial that only aired in certain markets, probably where Budweiser is still relatively popular. But it didn't have that central anchor. In fact, I saw articles where people were like, why didn't Budweiser have a commercial? Where's the Clydesdales? That really shows that they're pulling back off of the main brand and really focusing on things that they think might be able to get a foothold in somewhere else or might be more popular in the days ahead of us. Anheuser-Busch said that they gave up its exclusive rights as a part of a rebalancing of investments. We know that as an industry, we are rapidly trending towards lighter beers. We're rapidly trending towards easier drinking beers, lower ABV beers. So it makes sense that even though Budweiser in the grand scheme of beer as a whole isn't necessarily that dark, isn't necessarily that strong, for the average day-to-day drinker, it might be. And it's just weird that they would pull back the main brand to let some of their other categories shine. And that's a strong indicator that things might not be that good. Things aren't going that well for Anheuser. I mean, the whole market is shrinking rapidly as people turn to other types of beverages, wine, spirits, crafty cocktails, what have you. And beer is kind of losing some of that limelight that we've had over the past 20 years. Seeing Budweiser not really gunning for that main advertising mark, it is very worrisome that maybe there are bigger ripples happening in the bursting beer bubble that people have been talking about for 10 years now. And maybe we're actually starting to see that death knell come our way. And I think that is a sentiment shared by some of the other brands that participated in that, particularly between Blue Moon, Coors, and Miller Lite. They found a way to take all three of those brands and squeeze them into one single commercial in what I think is a very creative and well choreographed manner. They use that one primetime, this one opportunity that they got in 30 years to solidify all three of their individual brands, two staple names plus their craftiest option. Instead of making individual commercials for all three of these different brands to compete against each other, they kind of unified underneath a single umbrella, and they're like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we got to offer. Are you interested? And I think it played off really well with many of the viewers and consumers. It also didn't hurt that the advertisements that Budweiser actually put out weren't really all that good or interesting. I mean, the Bud Light commercial, they had a little celebrity in there. It was, a cute, quirky commercial, had that classic ringtone song in it. But overall, not very memorable. It didn't bring up that whole heritage and legacy that Budweiser always plays on. Didn't have the iconic mascots, the Clydesdales. There was no Spuds McKenzie. There was no Beerman. There was none of that. It was just kind of lackluster. And the Busch commercial, I mean, it was okay, but nothing memorable. So not only did Budweiser open up the floodgates for other brands to come in and compete against them, but they also just didn't put that strong of a foot forward, which is weird because Budweiser is known for their legendary, sometimes combative marketing, and it's just very strange. It has to be something bigger going on in the industry. If they're pulling back so hard, they're consolidating all their brands into one commercial, maybe the Super Bowl isn't pulling as hard, or it wasn't projected to pull as hard for beer brands as maybe it used to at one point in time. And maybe these breweries are trying to save some of their money and not invest so heavily into something that they might not get as big of a return on. The next big boy player in the game was Heineken. And again, this is Heineken's first debut in decades into the Super Bowl. They definitely tried to go at this with a multi-pronged attack. They went with the celebrity endorsement. They kind of went with the whole fanaticism that is surrounding superhero movies and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, really getting some of those fans interested in their brand. But most interestingly is you would think after 30 years of not having an advertising spot, they would go in with their primary brand. But no, they went in with their alcohol-free brand. This kind of loops back around into the conversation we had earlier regarding lower ABV beers, lighter beers, things of that nature. Very unusual for a beer brand at all to advertise during the Super Bowl that isn't Budweiser, but secondly to advertise a non-staple lineup, a core member of their portfolio, but lastly for it to be alcohol free. I can't think of a bigger indicator for where the industry as a whole is going than that. We have seen a huge rise in low carb, low ABV, low calorie beers, and this Heineken 0.0, I mean, it kind of really encapsulates on all of those trends, and I can't think of a better way for Heineken to get that out there. Hey, look, you like Heineken, but you're watching your weight, or you don't want to drink as much alcohol, whatever. Here we go. Here's the best offer we can provide to you at the biggest advertising moment. But the one commercial I saw that I think garnered the most conversation this year actually revolved around Samuel Adams, their Boston Lager.
Sam Adams Boston Lager. Now brighter? Imagine that. A brighter Boston.
I know me, and probably many of you out there who saw this commercial, were rather shocked about it. One, very cool that Sam Adams, a craft beer, one of the bigger craft breweries, but a craft brewery nonetheless, was actually in the Super Bowl. Not the first one to do it, but definitely one of the first to really get their name out there and get a buzz generated, a conversation going around it. The conversation is not so good. Apparently, for their iconic Boston Lager, the staple of their entire business model, they changed the recipe and they kind of made its debut to the general public during the Super Bowl.
Boston Lager, now brighter. Sam Adams, baby.
They made it lighter, a lighter Boston Lager, known for being one of the best amber lagers out there. It's especially one of the most historic, one of the most important in the craft beer world. Everyone's like, first Fat Tire changed, and now Boston Lager changed. The death of the American amber beer, which maybe is a topic of discussion for another day. But the important thing is that, again, it's following those same trends. They're lightening up their original recipe in an overall sagging sales market. They're reformulating, they're tooling around with their staple, their foundation, to be able to get people interested in beer again. So if people are rapidly approaching lower ABV, lighter beers, they were going to risk everything to be able to capture it. And they say there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I don't know. Seeing how people are reacting to the Fat Tire fiasco, the amount of time it took to plan, retool, all the testing, designs, and everything to create a lighter Boston Lager. I mean, I'm sure it was too late at that point, but seeing that backlash that Fat Tire received, and then going forward and putting it out in the Super Bowl, it was a risky move. I don't know how it's going to play out for them. I mean, people have already been kind of turning their backs on Samuel Adams and Boston Lager for many years, but maybe this is why they're doing it. If they're no longer the favorite child of the craft beer movement, maybe they have to become a bit more of a gateway beer than they already were. Find a way to break into newer markets, pull people away from the bigger brands back into craft beer the way they did it 30 years ago, a reinvention of themselves in a modern era. If I had to summarize what I'm really trying to get at here, what I saw, the trends and the patterns, is that as a whole, the beer industry is rapidly changing. Advertising and marketing plans, they have to be reformatted, retooled, because people just aren't flocking to beer the way they once were. If Budweiser no longer thinks it is a viable strategy to dominate the Super Bowl, I don't know what other marketing opportunities there are. What else? Where else do you go? What do you do? So the conclusion of that is that there is a possibility that there are some very, very choppy waters ahead. If the big boys are seeing it that way, who knows what that's going to spell for craft breweries in the future. It's probably going to be rough. But secondly, it reinforces the trends that we've already been seeing. The way forward to be a successful brewery nowadays seems to be lower ABV. It seems to be lighter beers. They still need to have a little bit of color going on in it to be able to capture the core audience, but they're going to have to change things up to be able to get that new audience, that new blood in. Lighter, lower ABV beers seem to be the way. I might just be some crazy dude sitting in his basement talking to a camera about beer trends and patterns that he sees that might not actually exist, but I just couldn't help but think it's so weird that all the big boys are playing a certain way, and then we're seeing all these ripple effects happen in the craft beer community. I do think things are going to be changing rapidly, but I'm interested to know what you think. Do you think that there is some massive industrial shift happening within our community in the beer world that is going to spell disaster, or am I overanalyzing this, overthinking it? I'm curious to know what you think. So thanks for watching, everybody. Really hope you enjoyed. Remember, there is a story in every bottle, and that life is beautiful. Cheers.